So we'll see. Anyway, welcome. Hello, Haunted Hearts Society members, and welcome to another episode of The Strange, Obscure, and the Bygone. Now, you may have seen the title of this video and thought, amusement park rides. I thought we were done with the carnival stuff, to which the answer is almost. And you may also have thought, Sam, what do carnival rides have to do with sci-fi or gothic film or literature? And the answer to that is, you'll see. Actually, this was originally just going to be a video version of the little history fun fact post that I made on Instagram on the subject, and then it kind of started to evolve and took some twists and loop-de-loops and upside-down turns and incorporated some other things. But if you are interested in whatever curiosities I uncover, you can join the society on Instagram, TikTok, Tumblr, Substack. Like and subscribe here on YouTube for updates and other random historical, literary, fun facts. Now, the first train that I was on with this was while watching the 1928 Universal silent adaptation of Victor Hugo's The Man Who Laughs, and there are a couple scenes where we can see what I would describe as medieval renditions of well-known carnival rides. The first being something resembling a Ferris wheel, and the second a ride that looks like a swing carousel. Now, the setting of the film is the early 1700s, and I was wondering, while watching, is it actually plausible for these rides to have existed in this time period? Because honestly, what it really made me think of was when you go to like a Renaissance festival and it's kind of just a medieval themed carnival. So I thought, let's look into the development of these two particular set pieces, and starting with the Ferris wheel. George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. designed the original steel wheel ride for the Chicago World Fair in 1893. The goal was to create something as impressive and memorable as the Eiffel Tower, which had been unveiled at the World's Fair in Paris. Though the wheel itself was a massive success, Ferris died only 3 years later at the age of 37 in debt related to its construction as well as multiple lawsuits. One, payment owed by the fair organizers, and two, a lawsuit for stealing the wheel's design. Very shortly before Ferris created his wheel of metal, William Summers of Atlantic City had built his own observational roundabout, which was a wooden wheel powered by a steam engine. And this actually does kind of sound like what we saw in the film clip, minus the steam engine, though still a couple centuries earlier. Though Summers' initial suit for patent infringement was successful, Ferris ended up winning on appeal. The original wheel from the Chicago World's Fair was scrapped in 1906. In the second clip, the swing ride, which is also known as a swing carousel, is a variation of the carousel. Amusements with swings affixed to a pole and pushed by hand have existed for centuries, and the carousel itself can be traced back to a training game created by 12th century Arabian horsemen. Carosella, or Little War, as it's called in Italian, was adopted throughout Europe, and kings would actually make the carousel into a grand spectacle, the most famous being King Louis XIV's Grand Carousel, held in Paris in 1662. Participants prepared for the event by practicing on wooden horses affixed to poles. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, wealthy people enjoyed amusements based on the wooden training horses, which were powered either by hand or actual horses. Eventually, the rise of steam power would make the attraction more accessible, as the carousel could be powered by an engine. In the film, we see that the swings are being pushed by hand, so this one actually is plausible. I am planning on doing something more in-depth with the film versions of The Man Who Laughs. And if you are also interested, Emily SW and I host our Dark Literature podcast, where we have not one but 2 episodes dedicated to Victor Hugo's original novel. Now, the second train that I ended up on and really de-looping off into outer space was learning about dark rides. We're going to jump over to a different genre now, but 2 authors that have been featured in both prior videos and pod episodes. And that would be the science fiction work of Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. The Dark Ride itself was created through a series of developments, starting with 18th century panoramas and magic ghost shows. And a panorama was typically a large cylindrical painting that visitors could walk through and experience in immersive scene. The invention of the steam engine, again, led to rides using trains that passed through tunnels. In order to find a solution for the problem of the tunnels filling with steam, other systems, such as an outdoor canal system, was created by Arthur Pickard of London, which was later adapted by Paul Boyton of Coney Island, and this put the dark ride concept onto boats. So if you are thinking something along the lines of a Tunnel of Love boat ride, that would be correct. Electricity eventually solved the steam problem. Austrian Hugo Pilz debuted an electric-powered train ride in 1898. The first story-based ride premiered at the 1901 Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, which also showcased a lot of electricity as well. The 2 stories that it was based on were From the Earth to the Moon by Jules Verne and The First Men in the Moon by H.G. Wells, and the ride was called A Trip to the Moon. So in order to try and imagine what this might have looked like, I read both of these novels, starting with, let's see, Jules Verne here, starting with, in chronological order, Verne's 1865 From the Earth to the Moon. So it starts from here. So this is actually gives you an idea of the length of this novel as well as the sequel. So this novel, first of all, hilarious. Verne wrote a number of stories set in the United States and also with the American Civil War as kind of a starting point. And this one falls into that category. And while I was reading this and I was wondering, why did Verne, a Frenchman, write so much about Americans? And eventually I could only conclude it was because he could write these really wild scenarios and have it be believable, because really only Americans would have the audacity. So this novel starts with the Baltimore Gun Club, which was a group of artillery enthusiasts, because as Verne put it, and I will read to you, this is from the very first page. Now, when an American has an idea, he directly seeks a second American to share it. If there be 3, they elect a president and 2 secretaries. Given 4, they name a keeper of records, and the office is ready for work. 5, they convene a general meeting, and the club is fully constituted. So he goes on to describe their inventions and experiments done by the members, some of which were involved in various accidents that lead to most of them needing prosthetic limbs, and the grand old time they had while the war was on. But now, as the war has ended, they have no need to make new artillery, and the club has grown bored. So what do you think a team of intrepid Americans decide to do next? If you guessed build a cannon large enough to blast a projectile to the moon, you would be correct. And if at this point you're thinking, this sounds kind of familiar, you would also be correct, because this is how we got to the moon in the Georges Méliès film, Le Voyage dans la Lune. I did a reaction to this movie, I think a couple years ago now, And now that I know more stuff, we can see a little better how all these things link together. The film was released the year after the Pan American Exposition. The ride simulated an airship, which the passengers would sit in, and then it would appear to rise over scenes of Niagara Falls and the city of Buffalo, and then on to the moon. Verne's characters over the course of the sequel novel, which was called Round the Moon, spend a lot of time describing the moon's topography, but they don't actually make it to the surface of the moon. Instead, they take one orbit around it, conclude there is no life, and then make it back to Earth, partially by chance. But this is where Mr. Wells comes in, which I also have. This actually has the original, actually I opened right up to it. So this is the novels as they appeared in the original magazines as they were serialized. And it also has all the illustrations, as you can see. The First Man in the Moon by H.G. Wells was serialized from December of 1900 through August of 1901, which means that the story would have still been ongoing when the expo started. Instead of a cannon, the two Englishmen in the story blast off in a sphere covered in a material created by the story scientist Cavour, which has the ability to block gravity. Apparently, Jules Verne hated this idea, as of course he had spent several chapters in his own novel giving us all of the math and specifications needed to construct a cannon that would get us to space, and Wells comes in here with this much more fantasy idea. Oh, funnily enough, H.G. Wells also directly references the Jules Verne one. So I'll read that portion to you. And this is Cavour speaking first. He says, "That's perfectly easy. An airtight manhole is all that is needed. That, of course, will have to be a little complicated. There will have to be a valve so that things may be thrown out if necessary without much loss of air. Like Jules Verne's thing in A Trip to the Moon." But Cavour was not a reader of fiction. But anyway. While we could spend all day debating whether Wells or Verne was better, the fact remains that Verne's space travel method wasn't any more plausible than a magic anti-gravity material, and Wells took us on an adventure that is much more interested in giving commentary on the human condition than hard science. But anyway, getting back to the ride, the passengers eventually would get off the airship onto a set meant to look like the fantastic moon jungles, similar to what Wells describes, which is also something we see in the Méliès film. They are confronted by moon people, which both stories called Selenites, and on the ride there would have been actors in costume. Wells's Selenites are insect-like, notably flimsy, as it doesn't take much for the narrator Bedford to kill them, and they make their escape leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. While Bedford is able to find their sphere and escape back to Earth, Cavour is captured and eventually taken to the Grand Lunar, or the Moon King. So while the Earthlings in Méliès's rendition are able to escape and return to Earth, presumably the ride passengers are also presented with a happy ending, unlike the ending that Cavour meets in the novel, when he makes the mistake of telling the Selenites about war. This frightens them, and Cavour is never heard from again, with the heavy implication that he was neutralized so that no other Earth people would follow. A Trip to the Moon was another massive success, and of course now we have all kinds of rides based on films, especially, and films based on rides. And after the exposition, A Trip to the Moon was moved to Coney Island and installed with new scenes that replaced the original ones of Buffalo. So that's what I have for you this evening. It ended up being a little bit of a Franken video. Again, I will have more to say about The Man Who Laughs films at a later time. In the meantime, give this video a like if you enjoy seeing how everything is indeed connected to something else in some way, which I guess is the actual theme of the year. We're just making connections, putting clues together, and not necessarily solving mysteries in every case, but we're seeing how everything is connected in some way. And also, let me know what your favorite amusement park ride is. I have never actually been on a dark ride, so please do tell me if there's one you like. And I think there's a lot of like ride-through videos that can be watched, and I would like to check them out. But I will be back another time with something else. Bye!